Welcome to this weekend edition of the Chiefs, and with us tonight is Ami or Anamani Pamintuan, the editor-in-chief of the Philippine Star. Hi, Ami, and happy
Hello.
weekend.
Happy weekend.
And mukhang kalahati lang tayo ngayon. Robbie Lampay and Lucy Valdez are not going to join us tonight.
Yes, at mukhang nasa quarantine area ka yata. Nasaan ka ba?
Nasa opisina.
X-Men.
Wala si Robbie eh. I had to do the big story.
Okay. So yan na yung studio
Well, no, the studio's the studio they're closing shop now. So I found a corner here in the office to be able to go live. Well, what's the big story today for tomorrow?
Well, nagagalit yung mga congressmen. Siyempre, yung interview nyo sa 5 yun yung kay PACC Bellica. Sabi nila he should name names. Diba? Sabi naman ni Senator Lacson, hindi daw niya alam kung, well, he agrees with Bellica, pero hindi daw niya alam kung mapapangalanan niya ni Bellica at this time. Siguro we can invite him and let him talk about it one of these days. Yan. Saka siyempre, balik na nga yung motorcycle taxis, di ba? Balik na yung motorcycle taxis at sinuspindi yung yung retirement visa processing.
Mga Chinese?
Well, particularly dahil nga dun sa mga reklamo ng mga retirees daw na 35 years old.
35 years old.
So,
kasi when you think about it, halfway through your life, you could have retired already if that was the case, di ba?
Ayun naman sinasabi ng Philippine Retirement Authority, kasama naman daw talaga sa mga bylaws nila na pwede naman daw talaga yon. Well, anyway, they're reviewing their rules. So, titingnan natin kung ano mangyayari. Yan.
And siyempre, hindi pa rin tapos yung balikan doon sa issue ni General Parlade at ng Gabriela.
Oo nga, tuloy-tuloy pa rin. Ayun. Well, yun sinabi mo na nga sa umpisa natin na i-convene nga ni Secretary Lorenzana yung pinangungunahan ng magiging guest natin maya-maya. But anyway, we can probably invite the guest in na, di ba?
But I'm not sure if General Parlade is already available kasi biglang nag-brownout sa Lucena City.
Si former Chairman Rosales muna.
Yeah, si Etta's already ready.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
okay. So we're bringing in former Commission on Human Rights Chairperson Etta Rosales. Ma'am, good evening and thank you for joining us in the Chiefs.
Yeah, good evening.
Long time no see.
Yeah, matagal na, di ba?
Quarantine ba kayo, ma'am? Quarantine?
Yeah, actually, I call it house arrest. Kasi, as a senior citizen, talagang bawal. Bawal na bawal. At pinipigil na ako, pinaka-stricto sa akin. Well, yung mga doktor ko advise me against going out. Pero ang pinaka-stricto yung mga anak ko. Hindi nga ako.
Ayun lang.
So, naka-house arrest ako ngayon.
House arrest?
Ayun lang. Mas matindi yung mga yan kaysa mga doktor.
Kasi sobra. Pero nagtuturo pa rin ako. Through online learning, digital.
Let's start off the discussion with what's been happening in the past few days. Actually, it's not just the past few days that this has been happening. Of course, you are familiar with what the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict has been doing. Not just the past few days, but also the past few months. Actually, more than a year already since the NTF-ELCAC was created by Executive Order 70. Maybe you have your thoughts on the NTF-ELCAC and what's been doing.
How to end the local communist movement, through this Executive Order 70. 70 ba yun?
70.
Well, actually, they've complained already. A lot of NGOs have complained sa CHR, and I happened to be there, and there were military officers there. So, what are you going to do about this? Because it's so obvious that you are muzzling, the right to free expression, and then you are silencing these people and making them actually. The whole point is you want to end NGO and people's organizations activities precisely because you tag them as communist inspired or related to the communist movement. And so therefore, it's a continuing struggle that we have with them, but it's getting worse. And I think that the anti-terror law has so much to do with this. It's not just terrorists like the Abu Sayyaf, for instance, who are recognized as terrorists. But I think that as far as they're concerned, the communist movement or people's organizations whom they relate to the communist movement are already recognized as terrorists. And so they want to end it because, well, the President Duterte has been very, very clear, no? Tama na yan, let's finish them off. Kasi no more peace talks, wala nang negotiations dapat. So yun. So it has
Yes,
been
ma'am.
going.
But the NTF-ELCAC has been consistently insisting that that groups under the MAKABAYAN bloc specifically are fronts of the CPP, NPA, NDF. Your thoughts, po?
They have no business saying that. These people were elected by the Filipinos. They are legitimately congressmen and congresswomen, just like what I used to be before, no? And they comprise the Makabayan bloc, and they come from people's organizations, and that's the whole point about the what do you call this? The framers of the Constitution made sure that we would try to draw in what they said with the left. Ika pa nga nila, the armed left. Let's try. And then there's jurisdiction here. Even the Supreme Court has said we should try to draw in the minority groups who have used extra parliamentary means in order to be able to enter the parliament, in order to be able to enter Congress. That's the whole point about this, the party list system as it started. So we should be encouraging all of this. Pero, unfortunately, the government today is doing exactly the opposite. It's a pendulum, no? And they have actually, and they have no business, attacking or red tagging, even if you say so, the likes of Sarate, and the rest of them, no? Yung mga Gabriela and so on and so forth. Even if there is the linkage or there is this suspicion that they are linked to the NPA and the CPP, for as long as they don't bear arms, for as long as they do their job in legislation, the military has no business touching them. That's my law. That's the rule of law, and I think that they should be clear about that. Then I'd like to add to Ed, no? They should realize that Gabriela has been an advocate of CIDO. CIDO is the convention for against all forms of violations and against women, and they've been very strong on that. That is why Gabriela is naturally attractive. A lot of people, including these celebrities na nila, di ba? So they have no business doing, because outside of that, Sister Mary John herself, one of the leaders of St. Scholastica, actually was once upon a time chairperson of Gabriela. Did she turn NPA? Of course not. Not only that, and maraming mga LGU officials of LGUs, mayor, at saka vice mayor, or municipalities, and so on and so forth, who have become members of Gabriela. So, yan ba naging NPA? Of course not. It's ludicrous.
I suppose in the end, what would count is whether there is a violation of the law that can be proven. I mean, there has to be a violation. Even if you assume, and that's a big assumption, even if you assume that any of these people are communists, and that again is a big assumption, that's not even illegal. The Anti-Subversion Act was repealed.
That's the whole point. We have to keep on reminding the military. Once upon a time, the Anti-Subversion Act was already repealed earlier, and then I think that this was recognized by President Ramos, no, during his time.
Ramos. Mhm.
Yeah. Kaya, even if you're a member of the Communist Party of the Philippines, for as long as you don't bear arms, okay lang yan.
Mm. Pero, we're talking about this topic because of what happened, no? Involving General Parlade and of course the famous Liza Soberano, the celebrities.
Liza.
So,
Liza.
gusto kong si Angel Locsin, pati si Catriona, si Miss Universe. But anyway, sabi niya kanina, nag-react na siya kanina. Sabi niya, first, he will not apologize. At pangalawa, medyo na out of context lang naman daw siya, wina-warningan lang daw niya na baka daw ma-involve sa violence yung mga nabanggit na nga na personalities. And sinabihan siya ni Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana na mahirap yan they didn't choose the term na red tagging, mahirap yan nagaganyan na naglilink ka sa NPA na wala namang pruweba. So, yun ang sinabi ni General Parlade. Wala naman daw siyang gano'n at saka wina-warningan lang daw niya na baka magkaroon ng violence, ma-involve yung mga bata sa violence. And in fact daw, yung pamilya ni Soberano, thank you pa daw sa kanila na napaalalahanan ng gano'n. Can we have your comment on that?
First of all, he has no business na taking care of them or trying to protect them. Freedom of expression and freedom of organization, freedom of endorsement, if you want to support organizations. That's fundamental, basic rights in the ICCPR, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. So on that alone, and we have the statutory laws. We have our Article 3 on the Bill of Rights in the Constitution. They should be left alone to express themselves. They want to join Gabriela, or they're not even joining Gabriela. They were just invited. I think Liza was invited.
To give a talk.
Oh, she can't even be a guest. Can you imagine? So it's ludicrous. It's ridiculous. And it's an embarrassment. Actually, it's an embarrassment not only for him, but for the entire military institution. Because there was a time, much earlier, after post-Marcos, when we were already giving security sector reforms, and they were already, learning all about human rights. May mga kapal akong libro nagawa ng military on gender justice. Ginagawa nila yan at ewan ko kung talaga naman ang tinuturo nila. But we would have talks during the time when I was chair of the Commission on Human Rights. And they would always invite me to talk about human rights. So he has no business, Parlade has no business talking the way he does. It's really such an embarrassment for him. Kaya Delfin Lorenzana na siguro nagsalita sa kanya gano'n. Freedom of expression, pabayaan natin sila. And at saka let them decide for themselves, no?
Yung committee, yung task force to end communist insurgency, kasi lagi sinasabi ni Presidente, well, you mentioned it already, ayaw na niya mag-peace talks. Gusto niya tapusin na tong insurgency during his watch or at least mabawasan ng husto. Did the group ever reach out to the progressive groups for dialogue? Kasi if you're going to end something like this, iba mas maganda kung mag-usap-usap. Are you aware of any effort to talk?
No, because it was hostile. It was a very hostile situation. I remember Duterte saying, wala nga silang kahit na barangay, hindi nila kontrolado may barangay. So, na silang tama na, tapusin na natin. Tapos na. So, very hostile ang atmosphere, ang conditions. And of course, he was complaining that the NPAs were also yung harassing. Yes. And I think to some extent then, tama naman yung harassment na ginagawa rin ng NPAs. So, may mga abuses din yung mga NPAs na yan, no? So, naiintindihan ko yun. But then, pagka ibang usapin kasi, yung NPA, armado yan eh. But talking, Gabriela, and then this Makabayan block, mga congressmen na ito, dun sa Kongreso, ibang usapin yan. You dialogue with them, you talk to them, and kailangan ng negotiations. You know, Mr. Duterte has forgotten that even the UDHR, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, during the time of Eleanor Roosevelt, a long time ago, right after the Second World War, she actually said, tama na ang gera. And all disputes must be settled through a peaceful way, diplomatic way, at negotiations dapat pacific lagi ito. Peaceful at walang violence. And,
ang problema siguro, ma'am, since you mentioned the NPA already, nahihirapan yata ang gobyerno to separate the activities of the NPA with the CPP and the progressive groups. So, paano kaya yun? Lalo na military, namatayan sila. Marami ng mga tao silang napatay din ng NPA. Yun na laging binabanggit ni Presidente. Paano nating maaan yun? Maseseparate yung mga, hindi pwede yung ganitong grupo i-associate nyo dun sa violent struggle. Paano bang explanation dyan? Kasi it's the armed wing. NPA is the armed wing of the CPP.
So, kailangan, I think dapat the military should review their human rights manual. Kasi meron naman silang human rights office. You know, they have their office. And then, pati ang PNP meron eh. In fact, I remember very well at CHR ako noon, nung nakita nila, yung PNP had this human rights affairs office and they had the women and children's desk.
Yes.
Yung human rights officer ng Philippine military, nakon siya, he was so inspired by that. We don't have that. We have to put up women and children's desk also for the military. So he went on to put that up. Ganon ang cooperative efforts and relations noong panahon na yun. And we would discuss human rights even within the I remember even the Air Force noon, when one time when I was being invited, sabi ko, kayo ba ginagalang ninyo ang mga LGBT community? Kayo ba meron bang LGBT dito sa inyo? No comment, ma'am. Kanilang ganun. Ibig sabihin, meron na. Di ba? So, pag ganun yung dialogue, ang maayos yung relasyon and then we get to understand each other. I'm afraid that has to come back. Kailangan ibalik natin on the negotiating table ito.
Dialogue.
Ma'am, but the allegation specifically being made by members of the NTF-ELCAC, but by this I mean, for example, Undersecretary Badoy and also General Parlade in the last few months, or maybe even a year, is that the Makabayan groups have been providing material support and they're a base for recruitment for the New People's Army. I asked that question especially in view of the anti-terror law that was passed, that was signed into law, I think in June or July of this year, which also penalizes support for alleged terror groups. So with that context, where does this all fall in?
Well, you have to show evidence because I remember, again, I'll have to use my own experience, because when I was in the House of Representatives at that time, we were very strong against that. Ang DOJ noon was Raul Gonzales, buhay pa siya noon, di ba? But we were very strong against materials being used in government for armed struggle, for armed. So, ayaw namin yun. We were against that. And, pero kailangan may ebidensya. So, may process na ayusin. If you want to remain as congressman in the House of Reps, kinakailangan walang paggaon, walang linkages. So, they were, of course, panahon sa Torian hindi kami nagbibigay ng mga materials and so on and so forth. So, yun. Pero remember, I was very critical against yung permit to campaign, permit to win. Yun. Yun. Extortion yun eh.
Yung election tax. Yeah, yung candidate tax. Pero ma'am, sige po, ilabas po natin yung use of government funds. For example, whether it was the former pork barrel before or so on down the line. What about, for example, and this is hypothetical, what about, for example, donations from abroad? Kasi, for example, that's why they had this roadshow in Europe, yung NTF-ELCAC. They wanted to campaign in Europe to turn off the taps for the donors' taps supposedly being channeled to progressive groups and then supposedly into the New People's Army. That's one. The other one is these groups being used as recruitment base for the New People's Army. Would these two elements be in any way could they be used as basis under the anti-terror law?
Well, of course, if you're going to use materials, government funds for armed struggle, that is actually against the government itself. That's legal. May basis ka, di ba? And then, yung kahit nga yung sa mga lumads I used to talk to Satur all the time about it. Alam mo, Satur, mas maganda siguro, kasi there was a time na nahuli siya, but he was released afterwards because he was trying to redeem the children from the military. So we discussed this again. Kaya open dialogue lagi yan. Ang pinakamaganda, pag bumisita ka dun sa kanila, kailangan kasama mo yung DSWD, kasama mo yung DepEd, para yung well-supported yung mga pagbibisita mo and efforts to redeem, no? Yung ganon. And then after that, kasi maganda yung mga eskwela nila Maganda yung mga eskwela nila. And ako, I'm all for yung, halimbawa, sinasabi na mga IPs, magaling yung executive director na namatay. Ang pumatay yata isang katutubo on the side of the military. Pinatay niya yung executive director ng eskwela. Pero ang accusation naman sa kanila, nire-recruit daw nila yan for the NPAs. Di ba? That's an accusation. Ngayon, kailangan makita yung ebidensya yan. At kung merong ganyan, foul yun. Hindi pwede yan. Do not recruit the children for the New People's Army. In fact, ang pinakamaganda yan, encourage IT schools done by them, pero palayuin natin yung military at saka yung mga NPAs. Dapat yung mga eskwelahan na yan are surrounded by local chapters, regional chapters of the DSWD, the DepEd, and government agencies that can be supportive and that can be assisting the LUMAD schools. So this was something that I had all the time encouraged, because you must also understand that, and I've told this to, kaibigan ko naman kasi si Satur. Sabi ko, actually, hindi nagagawa ng DepEd yung nagagawa nila. Kumupunta sila doon sa liblib rather. At doon sila, organize, tapos natatayo ng mga eskwelahan. That should always be encouraged, and that because, syempre, ang attitude natin is always for the common good, for the good of the children, for the good of the people. Yun.
Ma'am, gusto ko lang sinabi nyo na in the past you had dialogues, the progressive groups had dialogues with the government.
Yeah. Ano
yung mechanism nun?
Ha? Alam mo, during the time, sasabihin ko sa iyo, Amy, during the time that si President Duterte was campaigning, he was still a mayor, during that time, I was able to go to Region 11. Nasa Region 11 ako. Tapos, nagbigay ako ng pag-aaral sa mga military. Tungkol sa human rights, security sector reforms, at saka yung IHL. Kung kailan, alam mo, ang galing-galing ng mga kwentuhan namin dahil merong isang military doon, I will never forget, I forget his name, Pero yung kwento niya na, there was a time, sabi niya ganon, my best friend was beside me. Tapos may encounter, magkakaroon na ng encounter. Yung NPA nandun sa kabila. Tapos, nakaayos na sila. Nag-enkwentro na sila dun sa battle. Then all of a sudden, there was a child that came out. Halt! Sabi niya, wag tayong kikilos. And because of that, nung lumabas yung bata, nung lumaban na yung mga MPAs, namatay yung boy, yung best friend niya. And that depressed him so much, but I will never forget that story. But ma'am, I do not regret that, sabi niya. Because the rule of law is you should never target a child. Kasi non-combatant yan. Mga ganyan natututunan nila. At saka we discuss, ganun ang dialogue ko with the military.
It's possible. Dialogue is possible. Kasi I'm asking that kasi in the light of the creation nga of this task force to end, can you end an insurgency without dialogue? Yun ang gusto kong sa tingin nyo, is that possible? Hindi naman pwede military sa yung one side. Diba?
Oh, remember Manny Bautista, the former chief of staff siya noon? Si the General Manny Bautista?
Yes.
Yeah, he had this all of the nations
Yeah, all of nation approach.
All of the nations approach.
Winning hearts and minds nila.
As part of the human rights. And he would go to the provinces and the regions and dialogue with the people. And that is the correct approach. That is the correct approach. And I was providing human rights, consultations, guidance, kung paano yun. Yun yung pamamaraan. Because, hindi pwedeng durugin. Paano sasabihin, durugin na natin sila, tatapusin na natin sila. These are human beings. These are people. Iba ang enkwentro, ha? NPA versus the military, iba yan. Armado yan. Pero yung sasaktan mo yung mga people's organizations na hindi naman armado, foul play yan. And the dialogue is the best thing in order to bring about the peaceful environment that is so needed, for us to be able to develop, to bring about sustainable development. Yun.
But with all that we've talked about, all the progress that has been made over the years in encouraging us a good sense of human rights in the military community, let me ask you about what you think of where we are right now. Is it still there, given how profiled the tagging has become, given how the NTF-ELCAC members shoot from the hip, basically, even with civilians concerned?
Because the mindset and the thinking of today's governance has very little to do with enhancement of human rights, even within the military sector. That is why, and the military is hierarchical yan, vertical yan eh. Kung anong sabihin ng principal, sumusunod sila. Ganon lang naman yun. Hindi sila masyadong nagtatatanong. That is why so much of what we had encouraged before, so much of what we had done before, wala na yun. Wala nang malaki ang nawala sa kanila. And, I was talking to media the other day and they were asking me about yung overkill dun sa burial ni Baby River. You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And why do you say overkill? Sabi ko, kasi mag-isa lamang yung mother, tapos there was, 7 ba yun o 8 ba yung mga military or police, whatever, no? Yung police na nandun, surrounding her. And overkill yun. Sabi ko, because it gives them a sense of power. Absolute power yan. It gives them a sense of power. And they want to ensure that people are always in fear. No? Tapos, natatakot ang tao sa kanila. Kaya ganun ang ginagawa nila. And that is encouraged because the mindset of governance of Philippine government right now is that way. No? But President Duterte does not mince words. Sabi niya, hindi, kailangan matutuan yan. He wants to develop that climate of fear. And therefore, sumusunod yung military. Ganon ang nangyayari. Yeah. The main point kasi is that we have to understand that every person has a life of dignity, human dignity, no, and human rights, and that is within the treaties that we are a state party to. The Philippines is among the best countries in Asia, or probably the best in terms of being a state party to 8 of 9 international human rights instruments.
Yes.
Ang venom hindi nagagamit. And then the statutory laws that come around, hindi ginagamit. So napipigil doon.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. Professor Etta Rosales, former chairperson of the Commission on Human Rights. Ma'am, maraming salamat for joining us, and it's good to see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yes.
Nice to see you too.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Well, we'll just go into a break, but before we do that, we'd just like to say that we were supposed to have as well one of our guests, Lieutenant General Antonio Parlade, the chief of the Southern Luzon Command and one of the spokespersons of the NTF-ELCAC. Unfortunately, his staff has sent a message to our team saying that General Parlade cannot join us in our show because of a power outage in the San Lucena city where General Parlade is camped. So unfortunately, we won't have him anymore tonight. Anyway, we'll just go into gap, so please stay with us.
Okay. Welcome back to the Chiefs. We're now in the final stage of our conversation. And now joining us is Terry RIDON, the convener of InfraWatch Philippines. Good evening, Mr. RIDON.
Hi.
Welcome to the Chiefs.
Hi, sir.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well, we were discussing
Thank you for having us.
yung problema ng mga progressive groups ngayon, and we were just talking with the former Human Rights Commissioner, Etta Rosales. And she was saying dapat daw magkaroon ng dialogue between specifically the military and the progressive groups. Ano bang tingin niyo doon? That's still feasible.
Of course, I think people would really like to have a new conversation, but they should engage not just the progressive groups and security forces, but also we need to have a multi-sectoral dialogue because, the issue of peace is something that should be resolved not just by the military, not just by progressive groups, not just by human rights groups, by everyone else, And we had seen that a big chunk of society is already being involved in this question. So this is something that should really and definitely be explored. And more importantly, Malacanang should really make a decision on whether or not peace is still within its agenda in the last 2 years of its term.
Kasi sa tingin niyo, will a dialogue still work considering na mukhang ginibap na ni Presidente Duterte yung formal peace negotiations, ayaw na daw niya. And then he formed this special group to end the insurgency. Pwede ba yun? Is it possible na ituloy yung dialogue pero wala nang peace negotiation and then the government will be pursuing this yung kanilang endgame na tapusin na siya?
Well, kung if the palace will insist, if the president will insist on continuing to have the NTF-ELCAC and not in fact pursue peace, baka parang for show lang yung dialogue. Baka it will just give the military a breather to make its posture acceptable to the public. Kaya nga, I think kung talagang sincere, hindi lang yung AFP, kundi the level of the civilian government, na magkaroon ng serious understanding on this question, on red tagging, it really has to come from the president because all the authority that is being undertaken by the NTF-ELCAC, by the AFP, stems from the clear directive of the president moving away from the peace talks and proceeding towards this basically offensive against progressive groups and human rights groups.
Yes, sir. But it's precisely that po eh. The NTF-ELCAC is doing this, we suppose, in behalf of the president or on the orders of the president. So with that in mind, what do you foresee? If the president himself has that mindset, do you see anything moving forward?
Well, yun talaga, magiging malabo po talaga yung sinasabing dialogue between the parties. But kung meron hong multi-sectoral, multi-party discussions on how to proceed with the peace talks, hindi lang on the issue of attacking, but really and sincerely trying to achieve and resolving the roots of armed conflict. Tingin ko, pwede naman hong pag-aralan yan. If this will amount to changing the mind of the president on the question of the peace talks, baka pwede pag-aralan at pag-isipan.
Pero sir, in the last few months, we've seen an escalation dun sa, I don't know if you call it acoustic warfare, coming from, for example, the NTF-ELCAC versus the progressive groups. So bakbakan yan left and right eh. And we have seen the escalation na it's gotten to the point na pati mga showbiz celebrities nasasama na sa usapin. Now, let me ask you po about that. Where do you see this headed? And I know you're also a lawyer, but you were also, and also just also for context, you were also formerly the nominee and the congressman of the Kabataan Party List, which was also being red tagged by the NTF-ELCAC. So with all these in mind, your thoughts?
Well, I would suggest to the NTF-ELCAC and to the AFP to really make a redetermination on whether or not this posturing and this strategy towards demonizing human rights groups, left-leaning groups, progressive groups, is actually an effective strategy. Because the facts on the ground are clear, you are seeing a wide swath of support on almost all issues that they are trying to take a serious look on. So there has been wide support on the burial of Baby River. There has been wide support on the defense of Liza Soberano and Catriona Gray for their support for women's rights. So I think it should serve as a reminder that strategy on all of these questions should be based on actual reality on the ground. So if there is a popular setback on all of these things, I think it's something that should be adjusted if they really want to pursue an actual hearts and minds campaign on all of these things.
Okay, sir, let me zoom in into one particular issue. Kasi for example, nung late September, nag-press conference yung NTF-ELCAC, specifically si Yusek Badoy, where she presented 3 alleged former rebels. It was a virtual press conference, and ang sinabi ng mga alleged former rebels, specifically yung mga progressive groups na nasa Kongreso, and one of them is the Kabataan Party List, supposedly these first nominees, the first nominees of these progressive groups were chosen or are chosen by the CPP, NPA, NDF. Let me ask you po, first of all, is that true? Pangalawa, even if it is true, from your perspective, is that problematic legally?
Well, una sa lahat, hindi ko alam kung ano yung pinagsabi kasi alam mo, when we had that Congress to choose the nominees, it was just a bunch of youth leaders, no, from different parts of the country that made the decision on who should be the nominees. So I don't think the CPP is involved there. It is basically a youth organization which is engaged in Congress. In fact, that was not the first time. It was Mong Palatino that was the first congressman. So basically, yung insinuations na mayroon sinasabi na parang there is an underground group that is trying to influence the decision, I don't think they have to try harder. Kasi nag-usap-usap kami doon. It was not in a jungle camp, ano? I think it was in a building in Manila. That it was basically open to the public. There were other organizations that were there. So tapos
Pero sir, would it even be illegal to begin with?
Yeah, I think it is the same. It is basically the same process undertaken by all party lists in choosing their nominees, ano? So I don't understand where the fuss is coming from, ano? In even thinking that this serves as a smoking gun on nominees of progressive party lists in Congress.
Ang lagi sinasabi kasi ng military, yung when they talk about progressive groups, nililink nila lagi sa NPA and violence. Yun ang lagi nilang sinasabi na kasi armed struggle yan at yung mga sympathizers are seen to be supporting armed struggle. I asked this kanina kay Professor Rosales. Kaya tinatanong ko nga rin yung dialogue na para lang ma-explain na hindi naman porke progressive kayo you're pushing for violence. So, what are your thoughts on this? Paano ma-explain nyo? Kasi yun ang lagi sinasabi ng milita. Kahit yung kila Liza Soberano, sinabi ni General Parlade, ayaw lang naman namin na ma-link siya sa magkaroon siya ng problema sa violence, ganon. Anong reaction nyo sa mga ganon? Mga observations na ganon?
Alam po niyo, problematic po talaga yung posturing na ganon. Kasi I think firstly, it's a communications posture. And secondly, it's a legal and strategic posture. And it is really difficult pagka umabot na yan sa legal posture and strategic posture. Kasi pagka every single person is being associated as an NPA rebel, lahat na lang ng tao speaking on human rights issues, speaking on youth issues, speaking on issues which I think are worth fighting for, issues on justice. Lahat po yan magiging NPA rebels na, and it is basically, it's not even a legal consequence because it is an absurd posture. Kasi, yun na nga ho. And I really want to go back to what some of the NTF-ELCAC guys said on Liza Soberano. We're not saying that you're NPA. And then the next point was, not yet. So, ibig sabihin, not yet. Parang they were trying to say, no, we weren't trying to red tag you, Liza. You're not NPA naman but not yet. So what was that? That's still red tagging, hindi po ba? So what I wanted to say is, yung ganyan pong communication strategy leads to a very absurd conclusion. Kasi unless and until these persons actually take up arms, you cannot say that these are NPA rebels, hindi po ba? Unless you see them in an encounter, you see them in the jungle carrying arms, this cannot be deemed as NPA rebels, despite them having progressive beliefs, standing up for justice, standing up for different types of lofty goals.
Sir, let me bring up the anti-terror law. Anong implications ng anti-terror law sa issue ito, especially since the military or the NTF-ELCAC at least it keeps on insisting that the progressive groups have been providing some sort of material support and recruitment base for the New People's Army?
I think it is up for the security forces to make that determination and make that proposition to the Anti-Terror Council. And if they want to proceed with prescription, it is theirs to prove, I think they would like to seek a designation on terror groups as prohibited organizations. But I think it is a different matter if you would try to designate open, legal, political groups as terrorist groups. So this is something that I think all of us are very interested in. We are concerned about this. And as soon as we get there, this is something that we would want to have a full, exhaustive determination on.
Yes, sir. Sir, pero madaling mag-designate kasi you're looking only at the 9-member anti-terror council, 8 of whom belong to the cabinet.
That's correct, and that is among the things that is being challenged by all of the questions and the cases in the Supreme Court today. And of course, we urge the Supreme Court to make haste in resolving all of these issues regarding the anti-terror law. So, inaantay pa rin po natin yan. And kung if the Supreme Court will drag its feet, then there's nothing that we can do. And we will have to face the designation, if it will come to pass, head on when we reach that point.
Magsusum out lang ako ng konti. How has the pandemic affected the work of the progressive groups? Kasi maraming mga issue na nire-raise about human rights in carrying out measures to contain the pandemic. How has it affected your work, and how has it affected support for the groups?
Well, I would defer to what the main progressive groups have been saying, because I represent a think tank, so
yes.
But I think the Bayan and many of the other major progressive groups, mass organizations, had been undertaking a strict protocol and social distancing measures when undertaking their activities. Even in the protest actions, I think there is a conscious effort to follow social distancing, not just because they wanted to avoid being arrested by the police, but also because there is a sincere understanding that the COVID is still present and is still lurking around the Philippines up until today.
But I mean, is the response leading to complaints about, for example, human rights violations? At syempre, pinupuntahan ng karamihan dyan are the progressive groups. Meron bang ganung lumalakas ba yun?
Well, syempre, there were specific instances po kasi ng parang medyo mabigat po yung handling ng Philippine National Police. Syempre, lalo for example, nung may mga nabaril na mga kababayan po natin, meron pong mga naaresto sa checkpoint. So I think, very conscious naman po yung progressive groups in providing aid and legal assistance to them. So that has happened. And well, for our organization, we had been assisting families in the social ameliation program appeals. So we were able to process at least 50 yung pong mga hindi na isama, yung mga na-reject po on I think very flimsy reasons dun po sa SAP. So upon appeal, so we had coordinated with DSWD on this matter, and they were able to provide them immediate relief naman po after the SAP appeals.
Balikan ko lang yung task force. Ang mission niya is to end the insurgency. You think given the circumstances and under this administration, yun ang gusto daw ni Presidente, tapusin na to insurgency. You think it's actually possible under his watch?
I think we have to be grounded on objective reality that any insurgency anywhere in the world has never been won on the basis of force. It has always been won on the negotiating table. Kahit saan po tayo magpunta. So, ibig sabihin, di ba meron ho sinabi si Einstein, pagka ho napatunayan mo na hindi nag-work ang mga bagay-bagay pero pinagpatuloy mo pa rin, parang medyo ikaw na mismo yung may problema. So, I think that is still the same thing there. And, well, I hope that the President will still reconsider in the last 2 years of his presidency. But looking forward to 2022, any person that would want to pursue a long-standing agenda, a medium-term agenda for the Philippines, should definitely include peace as one of the main strategies for economic development in 2022 and beyond.
Okay. Attorney Terry Ridon, sir, maraming salamat po for joining us tonight and thank you for your insights.
Thank you,
Maraming salamat
Attorney.
po. Mabuhay po
Thank
kayo. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Again, we tried to get in touch with the Lieutenant General Antonio Parlade of the Southern Luzon Command and of the NTF-ELCAC. Unfortunately, his staff says that hindi na pwede because of the power outage or technical issues from Lucena City. So we'll have to leave it at that.
Ulitin ko lang yung sinabi niya. He's not going to apologize na for what he said about Liza Soberano and sila Angel Locsin. Ayan na sinabi niya.
Okay. Anyway, magmi-meeting naman sila ni General Lorenzana eh. Sorry, ni Secretary Lorenzana eh.
Sige.
Medyo manghang yung sinabi ni Secretary Lorenzana.
medyo diplomatic na shut up first. Shut up if you don't have the proof. No? Mas maano siya sa winning hearts and minds siguro. Siguro imbitahin natin si Secretary Lorenzana.
Oh yeah, we should.
Yes.
Okay. I suppose it's time to say happy weekend.
Happy weekend.
Dalawang araw na lang, Lunes na ulit.
Okay. Sige.
And that's it for this weekend edition of the Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. I'm Edlin Gao, One News.
I'm Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star, and we are One News.